Actually, we're just looking forward to the holidays, opportunity to go downtown and shop and go to the Valley and shop and buy your presents. For those of you that have waited till the last minute, there's still plenty of time to do that. But actually, I want to take a few minutes today to acknowledge a very special person in the eyes of the Chamber. You know, many of you probably already know that Jan Trigg has finally made the decision to retire at the end of the year. I've had the pleasure of working with Jan for many years, even before I joined the Chamber. But from the Chamber's perspective, Jan has made sure that Coeur Kensington Gold Mine is an active member of the Chamber. Actually, I don't think there's been an event that Jan has not been involved in one way or the other. And of course, for those of you that remember when we used to actually have face-to-face meetings, Jan was a regular at our luncheons. I took a few minutes and did a little digging up at the mine, no pun intended, and found out a little bit more information on Jan that I didn't know. Jan is the longest tenured employee at Coeur, Alaska, and she started working for the mine in July of 1997. Now, to put 1997 in perspective, in terms of you're trying to open a gold mine, gold prices were in the process of plummeting from $365 an ounce to $282, going in the wrong direction while they were permitting the mine. Just for perspective, this morning gold opened at $1,890 an ounce. Jan played a huge part of Kensington Mine's history, from permitting the new mine in Southeast Alaska. She helped navigate the Supreme Court litigation, and finally moving the Kensington Mine into production. She was involved in 2 environmental impact statements, and of course, she's currently engaged in the permitting process right now to extend the life of the mine. Over the 23 years that Jan has worked for Coeur, Alaska, she's been the office manager, manager of community relations and government affairs, manager of IT, and finally the manager of external affairs, and worked with at least 4 different general managers. Throughout this time, she's been the voice of Kensington, maintaining close ties to the community, identifying where Kensington could support and assist our friends and neighbors. So Jan, on behalf of the Chamber, I want to thank you for your years of service to Coeur, and specifically for your support of the Chamber throughout this time. And we absolutely wish you well. And while we're not able to present you with a gold watch, we will present you with your first individual membership in the Chamber, because we want you to come back to all of our luncheons and participate. So Jan, good luck. It's been great to have you as a friend, and that will of course continue after you leave Coeur. You've been a great friend and Chamber supporter. Thanks, Jan. And Eric, that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Craig. And I certainly want to echo Craig's sentiment there, Jan. Congratulations on your retirement. I hope that we will see you at a live in-person Chamber meeting before the end of my year, and I would love to be able to congratulate you in person on your retirement. And thank you for all your support of the Chamber. It's most appreciated. I want to encourage everyone here today to wear your masks when you're out in public and practice your social distancing. This is the most effective thing we can do as a community to keep this virus under control. And by continuing to social distance and wear our masks when we are out in public, we can keep our exposure to a minimum. And I also want to thank everybody for doing that. As I've been out over the last few days doing my shopping and around town, I have seen nothing but compliance and everybody wearing masks. I've seen some excellent masks out there. So please continue to do that. If you're a business, we do have mask required signage available at the Chamber office. You can email info@junochamber.com to request yours, and Maggie will be more than happy to get you some. I also have a supply of them down here at the Red Dog Saloon. So if you're located downtown and you need a sign for your business, feel free to come into the Red Dog and ask for one. We'll be happy to give you one. The Legislative Affairs Agency is getting ready for the upcoming session and is looking for housing for legislators and staff for this year. There is a need for rooms, apartments, and homes starting in January. Please call Molly Kiesel at 465-3800 for more information. This is an opportunity for Juneau to show that we are the best capital city and that we support the legislature to be able to conduct the people's business in the Capitol during the session. Interested members can also contact Wayne Jensen at 321-0838. For today's program, I want to remind everyone, whether you're a Chamber member or not, to use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. So during our today's presentation, if you think of a question, don't hesitate to type it in. Don't wait till the end. Type it in when you think of it so it doesn't slip your mind in the bottom in the Q&A tab. And then at the end of the program, we will answer all those that we can get to with the time remaining. Okay, with that, today, I am very pleased to welcome our presenter today, Ben Stevens. Ben Stevens serves as Chief of Staff to Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy. He is a lifelong Alaska resident and has had a strong career in Alaska politics and public policy. Ben received his BA in economics at Arizona State University and earned his Master's of Business Administration from George Washington University. Upon completing his degree, Ben returned to Alaska and worked in the commercial fishing industry and eventually managed his own consulting firm. After being appointed to the Alaska State Senate in August 2001 by Governor Tony Knowles, Ben went on to serve as Alaska Senate Majority Leader and Senate President. He represented Senate District N from 2001 through 2006 and successfully enhanced resource development, fishing regulation, and transportation projects. Following his legislative service, Ben managed a marine transportation company in Alaska for Salt Chuck, overseeing fuel transportation in the state. Ben has had a wide-ranging involvement with many nonprofit organizations, including DARE Alaska, Special Olympics Alaska, the Boys and Girls Club, Suicide Prevention Council of Alaska, Anchorage Downtown Rotary, and the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce. Ben, welcome to the Juneau Chamber of Commerce, and the floor is yours. Ben, I'm not hearing you. I don't know if you're muted still.
Sorry about that. I was looking at the camera there. Do you hear me now, Eric?
Now I got you. Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. Thank you for that introduction. And I also, too, want to congratulate Jan Trigg for a career of service to the Corps and to the residents of Juneau and to the state. In modern days, to see a career that dedicated to one entity and one organization is a tribute. So congratulations on that, Jan. So I wanted to talk to a couple of things today, about the disasters that we faced, sort of an overview of the budget, and then kind of a brief year in review of what we've faced here. It's not news to anyone that there's been a challenging year individually and also for the state as well as for the nation. So, but I think most recently wanted to address a couple of things about what's going on down there in Southeast. We understand, the concept that not the concept, but the impact of the lack of the cruise industry in Southeast, also combined with diminished salmon returns, and then on top of that, the recent natural disasters with the storms and the flooding and the challenges that it's done to the power utilities as well as to things like DiePack, and then also up in Haines with the real tragedies that have occurred that are natural, that we really can't do anything but react and try to pull together to do the best for those communities. And it's a tribute to the people from Juneau and to all the utilities and all the facilities that you and Juneau there have done to reach out to assist in the Haines. So we wanted to recognize that. The governor has declared a region-wide disaster, which is really a rarity in terms of disaster declarations for Southeast. And then we're working with FEMA and Commissioner Sachs from the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs is working with FEMA to make sure that we get that federal disaster declaration, which we anticipate, it's going to come soon. We're just making sure that it's done properly so that all the communities that are impacted, I believe there's 7 now that are in that regional disaster declaration that we want to make sure have the ability to receive FEMA reimbursements as they go through. In a combination with what's happened and what's anticipated to happen with the weather, it just seems like these weather patterns are just screeching across the Central Pacific in the north, in the lower North Pacific, and just slamming right there into the coast and just letting loose. I read somewhere that an atmospheric river is how they described it, which is a unique term that I hadn't heard before. So that's just a brief overview that, we've got a lot of people trying to provide a lot of resources and making sure that we can do what we can specifically in this short-term response to these circumstances. So maybe I'd just jump into a little bit of a year in review. It's certainly a unique year. A year ago, we were going down to Juneau, and our economy was essentially on fire, the most active, the busiest economy we had in Alaska in 20 years. Unemployment was at a record low in January. Wages were at a 10-year high. Employment on the North Slope was at a record. And then, that quickly turned into upside down, and by the mid-April, we were at 40,000 unemployed, and by June, we had almost 90,000 people on unemployment insurance. And so it turned quick and it turned fast. But I think that we want to highlight some of the successes that we were able to do statewide, and I think probably one of the things that impacted coastal Alaska, not just southeast, but also south central, the Aleutian chain, and certainly Bristol Bay, was that the fishing community, from the processors to the harvesters, and also to the communities that have operations right in the middle of their town, all got together to put protocols in place to try to contain any spread of the virus in their communities. And they were able to execute fisheries. They were able to, harvest, process, ship the resources out of those regions in the state with pretty successfully. We had a few circumstances that were isolated. Sitka, I believe, had one. There was a bit of one in Cordova, a small one we even had one here in Anchorage at a processor. But overall, I think given the amount of people and the amount of the transportation and the amount of travel that took place, it was without a doubt a success in how the fisheries were executed. Certainly, some fisheries were successful based on the returns and the quantity of product harvested. Some were disasters. We have a lot of disasters being analyzed now for actually fisheries disasters based on the economics of it. But I do think that it was a success that we were able to prosecute those fisheries successfully all across the state. And certainly in some areas for coastal Alaska, that helped negate that terrible impact of not having any tourism in the communities. A couple of the other things for highlight, we are number one in terms of testing per population, testing for the SARS virus, and that's given the fact that we have our demographics and our geographic challenges. I mean, that in itself is a huge achievement. We had over 1 million tests to date that have been done in Alaska. Again, that's the highest percentage per capita in the nation. We also have some of the lowest death rate. We have some of the lowest positivity rates. And we did that. We achieved some of these metrics by taking action early. I mean, the governor was one of the first ones to take action to impose restrictions on interstate travel. And then we worked hard to impose a way to open interstate travel by a testing protocol. And so we were able to contain the importation, for lack of a better description, of that virus. And that was, no doubt, turned out to be an early move that had benefits beyond expectations. Another thing that the governor did early that a lot of people don't realize is that once we found out what happened down in Kirkland with the assisted living home facility and that hotspot that happened there in early April, we locked down all assisted living homes and worked with those providers to make sure that the people that were working in those homes either lived there or they got tested. And, you know, fortunately, we didn't have a severe outbreak. We've had some, unfortunately, in assisted living homes that have caught the virus. But overall, in general, the congregate housing in Alaska has not been a real hotspot without any real significant impacts. And I think those were early actions that the governor took, and they're just examples of early action took place. You know, we're still dealing with some differing types of management tools across the state, and I think that in itself highlights the fact that one of the governor's main objectives through this whole thing is local determination. Some communities that don't have a lot of facilities, that may not have lots of healthcare beds in their communities, were able to impose even stricter travel restrictions than what we did at the state level. And so that helped as well in containing the spread of virus in those remote communities. So it's really been a culmination of a lot of small steps that created the success. And I just can't help that add that a lot of people don't know it, but the successes that we've here that have been in place here in Alaska have been recognized at the national level from the CDC. Commissioner Adam Crum was recently named to the working group for Operation Warp Speed on the distribution planning of the vaccine, and he got to that because each state was required to submit a distribution plan to the CDC early on, about mid-October, and then some iterations came and some amendments to our plan, and by the time our plan was finalized and approved and sent back, it's now become a model for distribution in terms of how to stratify the distribution, who gets first priority, and actually a system in place to make sure that once the vaccination is received, there's a logical and method to distribute the vaccination and actually deliver the vaccine to people based on a priority. And so it's been working pretty well. Vaccination is here in Alaska now. 35,000 were received this week. We expect another, I believe, 26,000 next week, and so that plan is in place. So the end is in sight. But those are some of the highlights in terms of how the states manage it. You know, there's also another thing that can't be overlooked is that the State Department of Transportation is a vital part of our economy in the summer for regional construction projects, and it was a real challenge for those projects to be conducted safely. There's lots of, you know, certain types of capacities in terms of engineers and or heavy equipment operators that sort of move around and come in and out of communities. And there was a lot of protocols and a lot of work with the communities to make sure that those projects could be completed and have at least some kind of economic activity based on those construction projects. And they were vital to certain areas of Alaska. I think one of the other things that has been a highlight was the distribution plan that the state put in place for the CARES Act funding. You know, we were, oddly enough, I don't know if everybody knows it, but oddly enough, there are some states that still haven't distributed their CARES Act funds. And it's based on a couple different metrics. One is several states are flush with cash, and they have a different kind of revenue stream into their state revenue system. But we don't in Alaska, and you know, that money came in right at the front end of the tourist season and the summer season, which is, as we all know, is big revenue season. And so we were able to put together a plan for distribution pretty rapidly with municipalities, and then make about $290 million available to small business support, and then money available for nonprofits. So that's been a pretty good plan, I think, is a success overall. everyone's sort of anticipating another round to come out of Congress, but some of us, Lord knows, we know, don't hold your breath for Congress to act, because they're going to act eventually, but until they finish, we don't know what it's going to be. But we think there will be some additional support coming to the state and to certain providers across the state when Congress does act. I think one of the big things we were able to do from the state perspective to help mitigate some of the challenges that businesses had was, you know, we suspended over 300 regulations, from things as simple as not having to go renew your driver's license to issuing a medical practitioner license to deliver telemedicine to rural Alaska. It sort of runs the spectrum on what we were able to modify in order to help people deliver services more efficiently and effectively during this challenging time. And I think I'll shift a little bit about off of the effects of what happened in 20, and maybe talk about the budget for a little bit now. The budget is always a challenging piece, and given the fact that the commodity prices across the globe are depressed, specifically for crude oil, the fact that, you know, crude oil production is lower than we've seen in over a decade, but at least it seems to have flattened out. It's no longer decreasing. As a matter of fact, October was the first month-over-month increase in production in oil in over 5 years. So it's a sign of a positive thing. We look for positive signs, and I think that's a big positive, is that month-over-month, year-over-year, October 20 to October 19, October 18, 17, 16, October 20 was an increase for the first time, which is good news. But we still face a tremendous revenue resource. So this year is the first year that the earnings that come from the permanent fund outpace revenue from other sources, and the other sources really are the oil production tax, royalty, production tax, property tax, and corporate income tax. So all told, we're still faced with about a $1.4 billion deficit. So it's a challenging environment to try to figure out how to balance those budgets. So the budget's really a different structure, but I don't know if I want to go into that. If you guys have questions about that, I can talk to you about that. But overall, it's about a $290 million reduction in the operating side. But in reality, the budget's flat, because the majority of that is from carryover money from 20, and most of that is from at the end of the budget cycle last year. The legislature put in $90 million for health and social services to deal with the pandemic. We don't foresee that in the year 22, so that came out. And then there's about a $35 million lapse or carry forward from Medicaid services that looks like they'll health and social services won't need that as well, because oddly enough, there's been a decrease in the claim on Medicaid during this period of time. So that's really the majority of it. And then there's a restructuring of how we funded the capital budget, which is a big piece of it as well. But if you have questions about that, I can explain more about there in the question and answer. The capital budget is funded. I think one of the agendas that items that the governor really wants to emphasize in this budget is certainty and stability for our construction cycle and for 22, 23, and 24, because he believes that the construction cycles really help secure long-term employment, specifically in rural Alaska and coastal Alaska, where some of these large projects can help provide stability to employers, and that we won't be continually fighting for match money for the federal projects in those out years. And so the combination of the capital budget with this proposal for a general obligation bond package that hasn't been really utilized for a number of years. Just some metrics on the bond package for the general obligation bond. For every $1 million that the state borrows, it's about a $66,000 a year debt retirement for the term of the bond. So, you know, $300 million is about $300 million bond is about $26 million annually that it puts onto the state's obligation to pay it back. There's justification that stability and employment opportunity in those across the state is justified to put that package in front of the people to see if they want to vote for it. And just a reminder, general obligation bonds do require a vote of the people for authorization before they can be issued. But it's the first time a package, the governor gave us a direction to try to find shovel-ready projects that are distributed as equally as we can across the state. So there's southeast projects, there's south central projects, there's rural projects, bridges, roads, airports, harbors. There's some deferred maintenance in there as a consideration, university projects, school projects. The list is not public, it's still sort of in development. It will be introduced as a proposal to the legislature in January, and hopefully the legislature will embrace that concept and put it forward to a vote of the people later this year, so that so that can sort of dovetail off the 22 capital budget and provide clarity and certainty for years 23, 24, and 25 to help stabilize that economic activity. The governor's budget or rollout last week also included some constitutional amendments that's been the foundation of his sort of long-term fiscal plan, which is a spending cap, of no implementation of broad-based taxes across the state without a vote of the people, and then also changing the structure and the management of the permanent fund to a true percent of market value management regime, and then putting a clause in there that says the amount of the draw and the statutory distribution for the permanent fund dividend will be determined by statute by the legislature. So it's a significant change, which has been debated for many years, and many people believe it needs to be resolved before the state can really move on to the next level, because again, it's sort of the foundation now of our revenue stream, and a lot of people believe it needs to be secured and be predictable. So along with that, sort of the final piece is the governor's fast-track supplemental introduction. And the fast-track supplemental will include a couple of things. A lot of projects were in funding for annual projects in the state were left out of the legislative budget last spring, because everybody sort of believed at the time that they would be able to come back and complete the work on that capital budget, but obviously we know that didn't happen. So a lot of those projects are included in the fast-track supplemental, to the tune of about $50 million for certain things like Dingell-Johnson funds and Pittman-Roberts funds, receipt authority for federal projects, as well as some additional money for CDF, for Council of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. Unfortunately, there's been an increase in that type of activity across the state. A lot of people think it's an unfortunate consequence of this shelter-in concept. There's additional money requested for the Department of Law to stand up and sort of supercharge our ability to defend the state's rights and obligations that the federal government, we believe the federal government owes to the state in the courts, because it sure appears that a lot of policy that impacts Alaska is now being determined in the courts, a federal court for that matter. So we need to have additional funds to make sure that Alaska's rights are fully defended. And then it also will entail a true-up payment of the FY20 permanent fund dividend. If you recall, the dividend was distributed early this year in 20, was distributed in July, a little less than $1,000 apiece, when the statutory calculation was about $2,900. So there's a request in a proposal into the legislature to do a stimulus payment of the true-up of the 20 dividend of about $1,900, and if they put it on the fast track, that money could be put into the hands of Alaskans by about the first week of March. And so it's a combination sort of stimulus as well as a true-up to follow the law. And then, of course, there's the third major piece of that, which is a standalone proposal to pay the FY22 permanent fund dividend at its full value. So those are some of the things that's going on with the budget. It's, again, if you have questions with that, I'd be happy to talk about it, see if I can answer it. But, additionally, outside the budget, where, the upcoming session is kind of uncertain at this point. We had a meeting with the Legislative Council last week. And again, this is sort of the uniqueness that we face in this crazy year is, we've had an election, we have a new legislature coming in January, and typically at this time, the administration, we would be in negotiations, we would be talking with the incoming presiding officers and the incoming leaders of the respective legislative bodies, but to date, there is no organizations in either chamber, and so we're not really having the ability to have any substantive conversation with leadership because leadership has yet to be selected. So that's just another challenge that we have. It's sort of in the background that normal society doesn't see those type of unintended consequences of what's happened. It's even as basic as we're trying to pick a date to what date will the governor deliver a state address. But under the normal circumstances, we would negotiate with leadership and they would send an invitation to the governor to come speak to a joint session on a specific date that they agree upon, but we don't have anybody to talk to. So it is certainly an interesting year that we're ending, and hopefully we can move into a more productive year in 21 as the 32nd legislature starts. But I think that's about all I have in terms of my comments, Eric, and so I got plenty of time if there's questions. We'll try to answer them, and if not, we'll try to find an answer for it and get back to them later. So hope you find that useful.
Thanks, Ben. That was great. I appreciate all the information there. You're right. There is a lot going on and still a lot of unknowns. Obviously, one of the questions that's always on the chamber's mind here in Juneau is Juneau access is always a big issue for us. It's a longstanding goal of the chamber, and I just thought I'd see if you had any updates on the status of Cascade Point and when that might be able to move forward.
So, yeah, so I didn't mention that because I knew that'd be a question. So, the piece that we've, there's the money that's been dedicated to Juneau Access for quite some time, and we turned around and asked the Department of Transportation to move ahead with negotiations with Gold Belt to start that first phase to Cascade Point. And my last point of information is that the contract or the proposal sits with DOT and they're analyzing it. That's where I am right now. There's a couple other things about Juneau Access that have happened significantly recently. I think it was Judge Beisling recently made the determination that the 4407 designation does not require a NEPA review. And so for those of us that aren't environmental attorneys, what that means is that the route that the Juneau Access takes goes through certain areas of federal land, and that's designated as 4407 sections that was agreed upon, and that the state has the right of way to pick a right of way through that section without having to do another NEPA evaluation. So that's a significant piece that just happened recently this fall. Unfortunately, some of the things that occurred in the prior administration, we still have to overcome that. But in reality, of all the choices that the prior administration did with that, the one that they did pick probably was the most advantageous for the project going forward in the future. We just need to solve our fiscal problem first to be able to show that we have enough money to maintain that road in the future. And so there's a lot of, the governor is still committed to try to find a way to move the Juneau Access forward. The first step, obviously, is the belief that any pavement north is an advance, and then we'll start tackling from Cascade Point around through Berners and all the way up, and whether it goes all the way through or it goes up to another terminal, that's yet to be determined. But that's kind of where it is right now. I don't know if that's useful. I hope that's useful.
Yeah, thank you. That is useful. Okay, so we've got some questions in the quick Q&A box, and I'll remind everyone, if you do have a question, there's still time. Type it into that Q&A box at the bottom, and we will answer those. We'll just answer them as they come in. So Murray would like to know what was the governor's reaction and yours upon learning about Governor Cuomo's treatment of nursing homes in New York?
Well, we were kind of surprised, because I think I explained to you a little earlier about how the difference was that, you know, we closed ours down immediately once we knew what was happening in Kirkland, Washington, and Governor Cuomo took a different approach, and it's unfortunate that, you know, he had obviously many more people that he was dealing with, and that's all I can say is we were surprised about it. We certainly didn't follow it. Ours are still under, you know, unfortunately, it has unintended consequences, which are bad, as you don't get to visit. The residents are more isolated, but they're safer, I should say. And you know, and I should mention that, you know, on our vaccine distribution plan, assisted living homes and those residents in assisted living, as well as the workers, that they're all in phase 1A. So they're the first. They're at the same status as medical care workers. And so our focus on vaccine distribution is medical care providers, and then those that are most vulnerable. And obviously those in assisted living care fall into that category.
Yeah, hey, Ben, to follow up on that, you know, as a parent and of a school-age child going into high school, I'm wondering if there's any thought your level to designating teachers in that frontline worker category, so they might get vaccinated and be able to help the kids get back to school faster.
You know, I don't have the answer to that, Eric, but I know that most people that are in a service-oriented position that have that have interaction with lots of different people, they are prioritized. I can't tell you the answer where teachers are on there, but I'm sure that they're in there. And on an off note, I mean, we're getting requests to prioritize just about every service-oriented that there is. I mean, from Uber drivers to dentists to teachers to you know, and it makes sense to prioritize a service provider above, you know, just I shouldn't say a normal citizen, because we're all normal, but we all have certain unique obligations, and it's hard. You really have to quantify what level of service they're providing. And there's a good group they're meeting today, as a matter of fact, to come up and do more diligence on how they're going to how they're going to make that determination for phases 2 and 3.
And that information will come out, or is that something that's not?
Yeah, it'll come out once they get it. Yeah, I think if you look at the Health and Social Services webpage and look in vaccine distribution plan, it's all public documents. You can find it. Yeah.
Great, great. Denny would like to know what regulations that were suspended are you going to just terminate?
Yeah. Well, we're in that evaluation process now to say, you know, look, some of these regulations have been suspended for, you know, a good 9 months, and how quickly and how, if we terminate them for, you know, into perpetuity, what impact will that have? And so there's some, as Denny knows, there's some complications. Some of those regulations are created through statutory authority. Some of them can be removed by commissioner authority. Some of them can be removed by executive authority. So we're going through that evaluation, and we hope by the time the legislature comes back in, we'll be able to present a proposal that says a lot of these things are sort of not needed because we just went through a year of managing crisis without them, and it resulted in a more efficient and more effective delivery of whatever they were regulating. I hope that gives you a little bit of answer there, Denny.
Okay. Someone else would like to know, last week, the Permanent Fund Corporation okayed employees living and working outside Alaska full-time. Why is your administration moving those jobs, not just out of the capital city, but out of state?
Well, that was action taken by the trustees, number one, so that the state doesn't have, you know, they have authority over their own employees, and I think there's certain circumstances where a limited number of people based on their discipline that they want to have them be in certain places around in the financial markets and or can help them enhance their earnings of that fund. I mean, it's a unique circumstance, and you certainly can't compare those jobs to a typical government job, say in DOT or in health and social services or in education. They're highly specific, very narrowly focused on financial markets, and it could be trading of derivatives. It could be something different. That's all I can say. It's not a practice that's going to be implemented across the government. We're not entertaining that.
Okay. So let's see here. Tom is asking about you're talking about fast track and shovel ready construction projects. Cascade Point is exactly that without any more necessary delay. State funded, so you don't need federal approval, a willing partner in Gold Belt. Why not move ahead without delay? Just how long will you give DOT to review a draft lease with Gold Belt?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, how long we'll review in there. We'll be talking to them about it for sure, but the project does need to have Gold Belt agreement with Gold Belt because it terminates on their property. The money is there, and so they're good questions, and we are asking DOT those exact questions. I don't have an answer, but some of you have heard me talking about it now for a year and a half, and I'm getting tired of having the question. I'm getting tired of asking those questions and then not answering, you know, when the timeline is. And so we're as frustrated as I think several people in Juneau are on the progress, but we'll keep trying. That's all we can do.
All right, and kind of on that same line, we do know that it would be cheaper to maintain a road than ferries. Isn't that a consideration when we look to the future about maintenance budgets?
Well, I guess that depends on whether there's no question that a long-term maintenance on a road is different than a long-term maintenance schedule on a ferry. There's no question about that. We have some issues with the ferries. We're going to look at those. we're going to put, we want to look with the legislature at the options and some of the oversight that Admiral Barrett's working group did, and roads, you know, to day ferries is a concept that's been in Southeast for quite some time. There's obviously another version that believes that, you know, mainline ferries are an integral part, and they serve coastal Alaska. We've done our best to try to understand what Alaskans want out of the ferry, and how can we transition that aged fleet into a system that operates to meet Alaskans' needs, and not the employees, not DOT, but meet the needs of the communities, and that's kind of where we're going to focus.
And let's see, there's one here from Drew who wants to know if you think DOT would entertain an idea to use underutilized ferry terminals for other commercial purposes.
Well, that's a good question. That, you know, that I'd say we should have them look at those options on how to utilize that, and what if we're going to have a different type of ferry service or a different type of vessel coming in. Do they need those big areas? So I think that's a valid question we need to look at. I don't have an answer to it, but we should have them look at it. They got a lot of, you know, waterfront that's had a lot of investment into that waterfront that could be multi-use for sure. But we have to have that discussion.
Okay. Well, I think that takes care of all of our questions for today. So Ben, I want to thank you for joining us today. I know your time is taken up by a lot, and I appreciate you spending some time with the Juneau Chamber. You're always welcome to come back, and we'd love to have you again and give us another update. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. This is our last luncheon for 2020. I want to take this time and wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. Enjoy your holiday. Please remember to shop local at your local Juneau businesses. They're all open. Downtown is well decorated. There's been lights going up all week around downtown. You should come down and check it out. Restaurants are open. The shops are open. Everybody's practicing social distancing. There's the obligatory login sheet and it's a hand sanitizer when you walk in, but that's a small price to pay. Please remember to wear your mask. Our next meeting will be January 7th. So enjoy your holiday season. Thank you all for attending, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.